Hey everybody. For assignment 8, one of the things that you need to do is start to use functions. And so I want to give a demonstration of what functions are. We'll do a couple quick basic ones and kind of describe what you need to do to get going on this assignment. There's 2 videos this week. There's this one and there's one on lists. You can watch them in either order and put the 2 together to basically get you a good point going on assignment 8. So let's talk about what a function is first in Python here. Instead of having lecture slides, what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to paste some of the things I say into the program so that you have it when you look at it later. But what a function is here is essentially it's a block of code that you can use, and you use it by calling it multiple times in multiple places that does a very specific thing. The most common use of functions today, it might be in Microsoft Excel, where you use functions all the time to calculate the sum of a bunch of cells in a range, or you use, say, a VLOOKUP or something like that. But you also may have used functions in algebra. And this is an example of the basic nomenclature. If you see something that says f of x is usually what we say when we see this nomenclature here. F of x equals 3x plus 24. It means that the result of the function is you do this calculation based on whatever value of x you give it. So if you give a value of 10, you plug x equals to 10, and you have x times 3 is 30 plus 24 is 54. And so that essentially is what a function is. And in Python, we effectively do the same thing here. I have, what I would call my kind of guiding principles or my informal rules of functions as following here, right? The first one here is a function needs to return a single result. And so just like this function here, it only returns one result. It could be a number, it could be a real number, could be a whole number, could be a string, could be a flag, could be a list even. But it is a single result. And it always, number 2 is it always has to return a single result. It can't sometimes not return a value, because the best programming practice is that the function always returns a value. Now what you might want to do is put some error checking in your function so that it returns a particular type of error code. So for example, if you have a function that always generates positive numbers, you could have it return a -1 in the case of something went wrong, and then you could check for that result after the function returns. And you have to do that even if you print an error message inside your function. And then number 3 is I always suggest you write functions in as most generic way as possible with good documentation. So that's rule number 4 as well, because once you write, for example, a formatting function or an error checking function or a file read function or a file parsing function, you might use it again and again and again. And there are functions that I've written years and years ago that I just go back to the code and I paste them in, and they generally work. So that's kind of the gist of what a function is. And so let's give it a try here. We're gonna do a very basic example here, which is we are going to create a function that computes the total amount owed given a price and a sales tax value. Maybe a bad example because we got a lot of folks in Oregon here, but hopefully everybody will still be able to follow. And so we're going to create the function by using this shortcut, the shorthand for define, and we're going to call this total with tax. And we're going to say that it's going to get 2 parameters, that's what's inside parentheses, in that order. And then I simply am going to say total, which is a new variable. I'm going to take the price, and I'm going to multiply it by the tax value added to 1. And so as you can see here, what I'm assuming is somebody's going to enter a value as a whole number. So if it's a 10% tax, they'll just enter 10. So I take the 10, I convert it to an integer, and I divide it by 100. That gets me the 0.1. I add that to the 1, so I have a 1.1, which I'll multiply by the total. And then I'll go ahead and return the total value. So now what happens if I run this program? Let's see. So I go ahead and save, and I go ahead and run it, and nothing happens. And that's because the program really didn't do anything. A function by itself doesn't do anything. It's what's called a declaration. So after all my functions, which historically and typically go at the top of your program, so I might create a second function, which takes something in and it returns something else. I create a bunch of functions. Eventually, my main code will start. And so what I want to do here is I want to go ahead and ask the user for a value. And I'll just call that T or A, and then I'm going to say input enter the tax as a whole number without a percentage sign. This is the type of error checking or input requirements that you can choose what you want to do. You might say that they have to enter a percentage, for example. And then I'm going to say calling the function and here's where I'm going to call the function. And the reason I have this print statement right here is just so that I see my values before I go in. It's just, and I'll take that out eventually, but it's just good for debug purposes. So now here's where I called my function, and I'm going to get the result, and I'm going to put it in a variable called total. The first parameter, which in my function is the price, is A. The second parameter, which is the tax, in my main function is called T. I could put whatever I want here. I could put numbers in here. I could put different variable names in here. The point is that the transformation from this line to this line, the variables that are sent to the function, this is what they're referred to within the function. And that way you don't have to remember, is this the price of item A or the price of item B, or is it the tax in this state, or is it the federal tax? You just create what's called a generic function here. And in the book, we talk about passing by func value and passing by reference. There's a little bit that might help clarify that, based on this example. Okay, so now when I run this program, let's see what happens. What did I do wrong? I forgot a colon there. Okay, so I enter my price, and I'll say $199, and I'm going to say a 10% tax. And it says, okay, well, this is correct, but I called the function, but nothing happened, right? And that's because the function doesn't print anything out, and I don't print out what total is, right? Now in the interpreter, I can go ahead and I can print that out, and I can see that worked, but I just didn't put it in my program here. So let's go ahead and put it in my program here. Now when I run it, it will work, right? 199 with a 10% tax is a 218.9. This is a very ugly way to display a monetary value here. So let me show you. I don't think I've showed you this here, but this is how you format a value to come out to look like US currency. So we'll run this guy again. And I forgot my quote. Should go right here. $25,000. at a 12%. That didn't work. What did I do wrong? Oh, I forgot the format. Instead of a comma, it should be format total. Okay, so now you can see here that this prints out perfectly. It puts commas there. It makes sure that I have two numbers after the decimal point, even if they're 0. So this is your trick here, and you could save this and cart this away. You can create a function as well that just says that prints a result in this format, right? So that you don't have to remember this every time. Okay. Now let's say that I want to do a little bit more intelligence inside my function here. And I want to say now let's do example 2. Add a flag that indicates if something is taxable. For example, in the state of Minnesota, clothing and food is not taxable. So I might want to have my program be able to call multiple times different values and taxes with and without the taxable flag set. So I'm going to create a second function, and we'll call it total with tax 2. And we'll give it this variable flag, and we're going to say if flag is equal to a lowercase y, we'll go ahead and calculate the tax. Else, we'll just set total equal to price because we're not modifying it in this case, and we'll return the total in this case. So I could create a while loop and I can have the user enter a bunch of numbers here, but what I'm going to do here is I'm going to show you how I'm simply going to call this a bunch of times with different values. So what I did was inside where I was printing out total, I'm actually putting the function with values inside here. And so I can create a bunch of these, and I can show different examples. Both with and without the tax. Let's see if this works. And I messed up something. Too many, not enough parentheses. Oops. Okay, so this first one will just happen as before, but now you can see all of these lines are a result of these 6 lines here. So we have $1,000 with a 10% tax, $1,000 with a 1% tax, $1,000 with a 10% tax, 100K with a 12% tax, and then the same values without the taxes. Right? This first value is this one. Okay, so you could put the format inside the function if you want, but then the values are not numeric values anymore. Also, another important thing to say is in this example, I am not saving the results. I'm only printing the results. And that generally is a bad idea. So I'll put a comment in here for that. Generally a bad idea to call the function without saving the result. Depends on the function, of course, right? But you'll find it's harder to debug if your function returns something and all you do is you print something and you don't have a chance to really understand, some of the intricacies. It's always best to use these temporary variables and store the intermediate values. Okay, so 2 videos here. There's this video, which describes how to use functions, and the other video, which describes how to use lists. If we go to assignment 8, you kind of need to use both of what we've talked about here. Functions are described here, and then how to use the lists are kind of described in the problem description. So by going through both of these examples, you should be mostly armed to handle assignment 8. The only thing that I'm not showing between the two videos is how to present the results in a single line in this format. So that's the exercise, the remaining piece that's left for you, along with the error checking. And so please respond to the discussion boards if you have any questions or comments, and we'll make some updates. Thank you.